All right. SQL interviews, everyone gets a little nervous.
Oh, absolutely, especially when it comes to the technical stuff.
Yeah, you've got that notebook open, maybe a Stack Overflow tab or two just in case.
We've all been there.
But, today we're not just going over the raw code. We're going deeper, like strategy.
Oh, I like that.
We're diving deep into SQL interview questions. Ultimate guide to success.
From World Insider.
Yes. And this isn't about just memorizing queries.
Hit the nail on the head. This guide is fascinating. It goes beyond memorizing syntax and into what the interviewer is really looking for,
Yeah.
how you think, how you'd problem solve using SQL as your tool.
It's almost like they want to see the code running in your brain, not just on the screen.
Exactly.
Before we even get into the nitty-gritty, this guide emphasizes SQL, how essential it still is. Even in 2024, with all this new database tech,
Yes.
it's almost like they're saying, yeah, we get it, you've dabbled in NoSQL, but
But show us you understand the foundation.
yes. It's like that common language, right?
It is. Data analysts, developers, even marketers who can wrangle data with SQL, it's a leg up. This guide highlights how it's woven into so many roles now.
Okay, so SQL must have, not just a nice to have.
Absolutely.
This guide also breaks down all the different interview formats,
Yes.
from like those quick phone calls to like the full-on whiteboard coding sessions. Does knowing what to expect format-wise actually help?
Absolutely. I've been on both sides of that table, and let me tell you, the more you can anticipate, the less those nerves take over.
Right.
It's one less unknown variable when the pressure's on.
It's like the mental game is as important as the technical stuff.
Oh, for sure.
So the guide dives into the basics, which is great for a refresher and all that.
Yes.
But it doesn't linger. It goes right for those like gotcha moments.
Yes.
Like the whole SQL versus MySQL thing.
Oh, that's a classic. And you'd be surprised how often that seemingly simple distinction, SQL versus MySQL, trips people up.
Right.
It's a way for the interviewer to gauge, are you just skimming the surface or have you really used these tools?
It's like they're checking if you know your wrench from your screwdriver before they even let you build anything.
Right.
And speaking of tools, the guide breaks down the components of SQL, their
Yes.
DDLs, DMLs, but it does it in a way that actually makes sense, like it's part of a builder's toolkit.
Exactly. It's not just about memorizing definitions.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that DDL, that's your blueprint. Your data architect lays it out, defines the structure, and then DML, that's where you come in, the developer, actually building and modifying those database objects.
Okay, I'm already liking how this guide is framing things. Now, I was a little surprised to see a whole section dedicated to the select statement.
Yeah.
I mean, that's SQL 101, right?
You'd think so.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about select. Interviewers use it to expose any cracks in your foundation.
Oh, okay.
They'll throw these seemingly simple select questions your way, but they're looking for mastery of where, clauses, join types, the subtleties.
So it's less about knowing what select star does, it's knowing when to use its more powerful cousins, right?
Precisely. It's about showing you're not just familiar with SQL, you're fluent in it. You understand the nuances, the different dialects. That's what makes a candidate stand out.
Music to a data enthusiast's ears. Now, I have to admit, when I saw joins in the guide, my brain did a little freeze.
Sure.
It's one of those concepts that always felt a bit abstract.
Joins can be tricky, but they're essential for unlocking the real power of relational databases.
Okay.
The guide uses an interactive visualization, which is cool, but how about we try to make it work in audio?
Okay.
Let's tackle that right after this break.
All right, so joins, they're all about connecting the dots between different tables in your database.
It's all about relationships, really.
Okay.
Think about it like you've got two data sets.
Okay.
Maybe one is a list of customers, the other is a list of orders.
Yeah.
A join lets you answer questions that span both of those, like show me all the orders placed by customers in California.
Okay, that makes sense. But then there are all those different types of joins.
Wow.
Inner, outer, left, right.
Yeah.
It gets confusing fast.
True, but the guide breaks them down with really clear examples. It's about understanding which join to use, depending on what data you need.
Okay.
So for example, with an inner join, you're only going to see data where there's a match in both tables.
So going back to our customer and orders example, an inner join would only show customers who have actually placed orders, not just everyone in the customer list.
You got it. Now, if you wanted to see all customers, regardless of whether they've placed an order, that's where a left join comes in.
Ah, okay. I'm starting to see the light. It's like choosing the right lens for your data analysis microscope,
That's a great way to put it.
depending on what details you need to zoom in on.
And then there's the self join, which as intimidating as it sounds.
It does sound a bit like looking at yourself in the mirror for too long.
Right. But think of it like this. Imagine you're analyzing an organizational chart.
Okay.
A self-join would let you connect employees to their managers, all within the same table,
Interesting.
by matching like the manager ID column to the employee ID column.
Wow, I'm getting that aha moment.
Yeah.
So it's not about joining different data sets. It's
Right.
about finding relationships within the same data set.
Exactly. And the guide provides really clear code examples to show you exactly how it's done. It's about understanding those relationships between your data points that makes it all click.
Okay, so we've connected our tables, figured out our joins. What's next on our journey to SQL mastery?
Well, once you've joined your tables and pulled all the data you need,
Yeah.
you'll often want to summarize it or aggregate it in some way.
Right, because raw data is great, but
It's the insights that are valuable.
it's the insights that we can glean from it, exactly. And this guide dives into how to use aggregate functions to answer those bigger picture questions.
Exactly. Whether you're calculating the average sale price, finding the minimum and maximum values, or counting records that meet certain criteria, aggregate functions are your go-to tools.
So instead of just seeing like a massive table of individual sales,
Right.
I could use an aggregate function to tell me the total revenue for each month.
Precisely. And the guide does a great job of showing you how to use group BIY and having clauses to slice and dice that aggregated data even further.
Right, because what good is knowing the average salary across the entire company if you can't break it down by department or by experience level?
Exactly. It's about getting granular with your analysis. Now, aggregate functions, while they're incredibly powerful, they can sometimes be computationally expensive, especially when dealing with large data sets.
That makes sense. It's always like a trade-off between getting the answers you need and making sure that your queries are efficient.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue into our next topic, subqueries.
Ah, subqueries.
Yeah.
They sound complex, but the guide seems to emphasize how important they are for tackling those more intricate problems.
They're complex, but incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
A subquery is essentially a query nested within another query.
Okay.
They allow you to break down a problem into smaller, more manageable chunks, which can make your code more readable, easier to debug.
So it's like those Russian nesting dolls, but for data analysis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But while they can be incredibly useful, the guide rightfully cautions against overusing them,
Okay.
especially when dealing with large data sets,
Right.
as they can impact performance. It's about finding the right balance.
It's always a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
Efficiency versus complexity. And it sounds like this guide doesn't shy away from those real-world considerations.
Not at all. It encourages you to think like a developer, not just a code monkey. Now, while subqueries can get you into some pretty complex data analysis, sometimes you need to take a step back and make sure your data is organized in a way that makes sense in the first place.
Right, like making sure you have the right ingredients before you start trying to bake a cake.
Precisely. And that's where database normalization comes in.
Okay, database normalization. I have to admit, it sounds a bit intimidating.
It can seem that way, but at its core, normalization is all about organizing data efficiently, minimizing redundancy.
So less like a chaotic junk drawer and more like a well-organized spice rack.
Exactly. It's about making sure each piece of information has its designated place, so
Yeah.
you're not repeating data unnecessarily and then risking inconsistencies.
Makes sense. So instead of having a customer's address stored in multiple tables, you'd have it in one central location and other tables would reference it.
You got it. The guide walks through the different levels of normalization, but the key takeaway is a well-normalized database is more efficient to query, less prone to errors.
Efficiency and accuracy music to any data professional's ears.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Joins, subqueries, database normalization.
Mhm.
What else does this guide have in store for us? We've covered so much good stuff already, from those basic SQL building blocks to some really powerful techniques.
Right.
But this guide, it doesn't stop at the theory.
It doesn't.
It goes right into actual coding challenges, which I feel like that's where the rubber meets the road in the interview.
Absolutely, because anyone can memorize syntax, but interviewers, they want to see you apply it, think on your feet. Can you write clean, efficient code?
Mm-hmm.
And this guide does not hold back on the challenge.
All right, hit me with it. What kind of curveballs are we talking about here? Well, you'll find the classics like finding duplicate records, calculating the nth highest salary.
Oh, yeah.
But it goes beyond just providing solutions. It walks you through the logic. It highlights different approaches, even discusses like the performance trade-offs of each method.
So it's not just about getting the right answer, it's demonstrating you understand the why behind the code.
Exactly. And to really test your problem-solving skills,
Yeah.
they throw in some real-world scenario questions, like designing a database schema for, say, an e-commerce platform.
Okay, now that's getting meta. It's like, okay, you can query an existing database, but can you build one from scratch?
It's a whole different level of thinking. You've got to consider data relationships, entity design, normalization, all those principles we've been discussing.
Yeah.
Even if you're not interviewing for a database architect role, showcasing that ability to think structurally about data, it's huge.
It's like the difference between reading sheet music and composing a symphony.
I like that.
Both impressive, but one.
One shows a deeper understanding.
Exact.
And speaking of understanding, the guide makes a really important point about these coding challenges. It's not just about the code itself, it's about how you think, your problem-solving approach.
So how you communicate your process during the interview is just as important as the code you write.
Precisely. It's about demonstrating that you can not only solve problems with SQL, but you can explain your logic clearly and effectively.
It's that combo of hard skills, soft skills. It's what makes a candidate really stand out.
Yeah.
So we've really dissected this guide, explored it, maybe even learned a few things.
I know I have.
What are the big takeaways for our listeners out there who have that SQL interview coming up?
First and foremost, cramming syntax won't cut it.
It won't.
This guide, it arms you with the knowledge,
Right.
but real confidence.
Yeah.
That comes from truly understanding SQL, the logic behind it.
Becoming fluent in the language of data, not just memorizing a few key phrases.
Exactly. And just as important is recognizing that this field, it never sits still.
Never.
The guide touches on NewSQL, cloud databases, even hints at SQL's role in machine learning and AI.
It's like peeking behind the curtain and realizing there's this whole other world of data out there just waiting to be explored.
Exactly. This deep dive, this guide, it's a springboard. Keep that curiosity going. Keep learning. Keep pushing your boundaries. And remember, interview nerves. Totally normal.
Everyone gets them. It's like that feeling before a big performance, right?
Yes.
Use that nervous energy to your advantage.
Prepare thoroughly. Practice your coding and trust in the knowledge you've gained. You got this.
And there you have it, folks. Our deep dive into the world of SQL interview prep. We dug into those technical questions, how to approach the whole process with confidence, and maybe a little healthy dose of curiosity. Because the world of data, it's huge, it's always changing, and this is just the beginning of your journey. So keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep that SQL code clean.